Mr. Mayor, you're now live.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It is May the 31st. One of my favorite sister's birthdays today. Happy birthday, Jane. Colleagues, we're going to begin executive with just a little moment of silence. As all of you know, probably by now, the flags at City Hall and hopefully all city properties are flying at half-mast in recognition of the horrific discovery of 215 Indigenous children at the Kamloops residential school. So I thought maybe we would just take a moment of silence before we begin our meeting. So I see Councillor Hensby in his orange shirt. We're hoping to have City Hall perhaps lit up in orange tonight if we can do it as well. So just in honor of those 215 children and all the people who suffered at the hands of the residential school system in Canada, we'll just take a moment of silence. Thank you very much. All right, colleagues, I'll call the meeting to order. There is minutes to approve from April the 26th, if somebody would consider that.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Mason, seconded by.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That's carried. Approval of the order of business. Madam Clerk, is there anything?
Mr. Mayor, no additions or the deletions from the clerk's office today.
I would like to test council. I have to leave the meeting at 11 o'clock to be part of another meeting for the big city mayors, and Councillor Deputy Mayor Outfit will take over the meeting just shortly before 11. I'd like to see when we go in camera if we could move 14.2.2 up. If nobody has an objection to that, I'd hopefully looking to weigh in on 14.2.2 a little bit. Just give council a chance to have a look at that and see if they have any problem.
Yeah, I've got a question related to, yes, that one. We'll leave it at that. And how that and 14.2 I think one. I saw something there that was similar.
Well, we can deal with them when we get to them. Are you okay, Councillor Russell, if we move 14.2.2 up to the top of in camera?
Certainly. Yep.
Everybody else okay with that?
Sure.
Okay.
All good.
Madam Clerk, thank you. Does somebody want to move the order of business?
I'll move it,
So moved.
Lisa.
Councillor Blackburn, Councillor Russell, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The business arising calls for a declaration of interest, motions of reconsideration, decision, deferred business, tabled matters, none of the above. Correspondence, any correspondence, Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There has been no correspondence received for this meeting.
Any petitions? Then we will move to presentations, colleagues. And so we have a special guest, and very pleased to have that special guest. There have been a large amount of anti-Asian racist incidents in the world, in North America, Atlanta, but also in Canada. Certainly, Vancouver's been called the anti-Asian racism capital of North America by some, and it's a very multicultural city. In March, you may recall, our CIO wrote a letter to all employees about anti-Asian racism and to the council as well. Thank you, Jacques, for that. but it happens here. And just before I introduce Christine, I'll tell you, about a year ago, I got a very disturbing letter from somebody whose daughter was Chinese, who worked at a store and was verbally assaulted by a customer and being accused of bringing COVID to Canada. And so this kind of ignorance, it was very emotional to read this letter of somebody in our community who was working at an essential job at the time being accosted in this manner. It happens, and it's important that we understand it happens. And so I'm very pleased that we have an old friend here with us. Well, she's not old, I'm old, but I've known her for a little while. She used to do some work with us. And, Christine Jin Yang is with us, and she's going to do a presentation on combating anti-Asian racism. Christine, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I'm good. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Joe, may I have you share the slide, please? I'm wondering if everyone can see the slide. No yet?
Just 1 second, Christine, my apologies.
Okay, no worries.
And I think they were in the package as well, folks. I think we have the copy of Christine's presentation.
Perfect. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councilors of Executive Standing Committee. As may I introduce, my name is Christine Chin Yang, and I'm the Vice Chair of Halifax Women's Advisory Committee. I also want to thank my Women's Advisory Committee for supporting me on pursuing today's presentation opportunity. Let's move to next slide. Joe, can we move to next slide, please? So a little summary about my presentation today. So it's about combating anti-Asian racism. My objective is to raise awareness of increasing anti-Asian racism. And also the content of this presentation will be an overview of anti-Asian racism. And at the end, I want to discuss how we can take action and fight anti-Asian racism. And as you can see of this slide, in March 2021, it was a horrifying incident happened in the United States. And this Atlantic shooting really put a spotlight on surging anti-Asian racism in North America. So we think about how's Canada doing. Next slide, please. So actually, anti-Asian racism is very alive in Canada too. And report shows that anti-Asian racism rising in Canada since COVID-19, but actually the anti-Asian racism didn't start with COVID-19. Canada has a long history of systemic racism. Next slide, please. Here at home, in February 1919, Halifax businesses owned by Chinese immigrants were the target of xenophobia anger as violence erupted in the downtown and north end of Halifax. And so how are we doing 100 years after? Next slide, please. So national-wise, let's report about since the COVID-19 pandemic on anti-Asian racism. According to this report, at least 1,150 anti-Asian attacks were reported to this organization since the start of COVID-19 until March 2021. And 59% of those who reported women, and almost half of these anti-Asian incidents happened in public space and parks, street, and 10% on public transit. The most common type of anti-Asian attack actually was verbal harassment, accounting 73% of total report. Next slide, please. So you may be curious, so how's the situation in Halifax? Sorry, just I think take a moment to load to the next slide. Yes, perfect. So I reached out to the Halifax Regional Police, wondering what's the number of anti-Asian incidents here in Halifax. Unfortunately, it's not readily available according to HRP, but they did provide me with the overall number of hate crime identified since 2018. So here are three thoughts I have. One is we have a lack of limit of data on anti-Asian racism incident. And with lack of data, it really creates challenge for advocates and the civil leader to make a case more for more resource to address this anti-Asian racism issue. And also, many incidents are unreported due to cultural differences, language barrier, and also immigration status. And also, as I mentioned from the previous slides, many incidents were verbal attacks. So when they are verbal attacks, many victims, they may choose not to report it to a police because it is not a hate crime. So these are three important things I think we should keep in mind. Next slide, please. As we talk about the challenging happened in Halifax and in national wise, I do some research and see how other government responds to this COVID-19. And for example, City of New York, they launched a Stop Asian Hate toolkit, including, as you can see, the purple area. They have an infographic provide information where Asians can report this kind of hate crime. And this infographic is available in 21 different languages. I find it's very helpful. And also our federal government and city of Toronto, they both launched some social media campaign as well. Next slide, please. So here as individual, I think what we can do is to learn more about the history and diversity of the Asian community in Canada and in Halifax. Also call out anti-Asian racism, including microaggressions. As I mentioned, many of these attacks are verbal attacks, and also amplifying the Asian voice in Halifax. I consider myself very privileged to have a seat today and to presenting to you. I'm really thankful for this opportunity. At the same time, I acknowledge that many of Asian community, they sometimes consider quiet, they may not be speaking up, or they do not have a seat on the table. So I think it's very important we provide more opportunity for the Asian community to amplifying their voice. As also allyship and support is very important. Next slide, please. So myself, I put forward two motions for the Women's Advisory Committee to consider. And hopefully at the end of the day, these two motions will come to this committee, and I would like to ask for your support. The first one is about provide information resource to support safety of women of Asian descent. And second one is to collect anti-Asian racism incident data with a gender-based data collection. And two motions are more with gender lens because it's come from the Women's Advisory Committee. And please move to next slide. As these two are the motions, but here is the last slide, one of the last slide of my presentation. I think the most important one for my presentation for the committee and also for the municipality to consider. One, I think so important to increase Asian communities' engagement. For example, establish dialogue with the community, immigrant and international student group. For example, we can have a virtual town hall or roundtable to understand what are the anti-Asian racism issue and how we can help the Asian community is important. And second suggestion is to increase public awareness and understanding of anti-Asian racism. As we see, City of New York, Toronto, they have some great toolkits and webpage. I think that's very doable things for our city to consider as well. Next slide, please. So to end my presentation today, I would like to reference a quote from a very powerful and anti-Asian racism video. To the ones who say we don't belong, it is land who should open the eyes. I want to thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christine.
Thanks, Mesa.
Yeah, and for those of you that might not know Christine, she's been a great promoter of Halifax as a city and Nova Scotia as a province, as a place to come and to live and to study and to work, and has done some tremendous work. I think that the message you bring today is very timely and important. I notice, Christine, I got a note this morning from what is it now? The Stand With Asians Coalition in support of the topic that I mentioned initially, which is the 215 Indigenous kids who were found in the mass grave out at Kamloops. And so, you know, governments have to look at all kinds of hate. We've as a city, I think, have taken on the anti-Black racism in significant ways. We've worked with our First Nations communities, and this is another one where we need to all be a united voice. So, is there any questions or comments for Christine? I would just ask. We have there's a couple of suggestions that Christine has left with us for consideration. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, thank you. I found it interesting that there was no data available, and I'm looking at I guess slide 7 of the presentation. Was there any indication about? So this is specifically about anti-Asian. Was there any indication about whether any type of anti-Black or anti-other race data was stored, or? Seeing a lack of data is a little bit challenging to overcome, unless we say, please also identify this when you're looking at cases or when people are getting in touch. Just wondering if there was any indication.
Christine?
So when I reach out to the HRP, well, they indicate that specifically, I think they don't have it with any kind of racial kind of specifically data. So I think there's some room for us to work together so that's why I put forward a motion through the Women's Advisory Committee, specifically for women, but I think as I understand, the HRM have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion can have some opportunity to collaborate with also, for example, organization like Engage Nova Scotia to work on collecting this kind of data and addressing related issues.
Okay, thank you. And do you know if Halifax, if the degree of anti-Asian actions are comparable between HRM and the rest of the province?
Oh, sorry, Councillor, I'm not quite understand the questions. Would you mind?
So you're talking about anti-Asian incidents happening in HRM.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how, even though you don't have the data from the police, you have heard of anti-Asian incidents, no question. Do you know if that rate is comparable to the rest of the province? Is it more of a Halifax issue, or is it? And I don't know.
Yeah, so actually, I don't have a number, so I cannot answer it directly. But it's also good to keep in mind is Halifax is we are a bigger city, and we have so many like Asian community live here, many immigrants, international students of Asian descent, and as I mentioned earlier, many of these attacks they are actually verbal attacks. So where can they report this kind of incident? Where to track them? I think that's the biggest challenge right now. Like when there's nobody record any issue doesn't means this kind of issue do not exist. So I think that's an important point for us to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. No, just a quick question. I know, Christine, you mentioned that you reached out to Halifax Regional Police. Is there any indication that that RCMP are keeping that kind of detailed data, or is it just a deficit of data all around?
As what I understand, they say they can do a case by case. So I'm no expert of this kind of how do they track the information, but I think it's very specifically. So I think I really, Councillor Blackburn, I know you're also on the board with like the police commission. So I would appreciate if you can help us support, see how we can do more work on this area.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if I could ask our CAO, Jacques, you did put out this note on back in March, I think it was, about anti-Asian racism. The recommendations and ideas that Christine is talking about, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on those and whether we can bring some of this to our D&I group or public safety group. There we go.
Sorry, I guess I was muted. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Certainly welcome the recommendations, welcome the advice we're receiving here this morning, and certainly something I'll be taking back to our team at Diversity and Inclusion, ANZIO, to have a conversation about how we can implement some of these recommendations.
Thank you. And as politicians, we have the same responsibility to see what we can do, both in terms of our public presence, our messaging, and also perhaps potentially in terms of recommendations to council. Okay. Is there anybody else on that? Christine?
I wanted to thank Christine for presenting to us, and having lived for 4 years in Vancouver and 8 years in Toronto and enjoyed the diversity and often bragged about how welcoming and peaceful our communities are in Canada compared to other folks in other places, rather. This makes me a little sad, but more importantly than sad, we will certainly view this as a call to action as well. And I look forward to these motions coming forward, anything I can do to support this and to support the CAO. So Christine, thank you for your presentation and best wishes.
Thank you. And may I add a quick comment to conclude? As you can see, my background, May is Asian Heritage Month, and I want to echo that the diversity and inclusion of HIM actually have done a wonderful job of celebrating this Asian Heritage Month. And today is May 31st, is the last day of Asian Heritage Month, but I think it wouldn't stop us to continue our work to support our Asian community and combat the anti-Asian racism. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Certainly, our city has become so much more multicultural over the last number of years. You've been at, I'm sure, the reception we host for the first year's international students, and there's a number of students who come from many parts of the world, certainly many of them Asian, who are now at a place where they want to live in Halifax, and we have to make sure that we're in the kind of community that not only says we welcome people, but that we actually do, and that we do those things so that they want to continue to live here. Christine, thank you very much.
Thank you. See ya.
Okay, colleagues. All right, colleagues. Information items brought forward, none. Reports. Nothing from staff, public, committee members, committee updates. We have motions in camera. If somebody wants to consider the movement of the in-camera minutes, that would be welcome.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councilor Mason,
Seconded.
Second.
seconded by Councilor Russell. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think the rest of them we need to go.
Can we
need to go-
do, can we do
unless somebody-
14.2.4 in public? I think that was to establish a panel. No, we got to put somebody on the panel. Never mind. You're right. I'll move that we move in camera.
All right,
Thank you. I'll second that.
seconded by Councilor Russell. All in favor?
Aye.
We will move in camera. There's a separate meeting for that, I assume, Jill and or Phoebe?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask members of Executive Standing Committee to please exit out of the Zoom meeting and go into the in-camera meeting. We will need to come back to the Zoom meeting to ratify after in-camera.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, folks, I'll see you in the other meeting.
Okay, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe we have a quorum as well as our solicitor. We are ready on your go.
All right, let's go live then. Thank you.
You're alive. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you. We're back in public now, and we're going to ratify some decisions made in camera. So I'm going to ask that we start with 14.2.1, and Councillor Blackburn, would you put that on the floor for us, please?
Sure thing. I move that the Executive Standing Committee 1 adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated May 20th, 2021, and 2, direct that the staff report dated May 20th, 2021 be maintained as private and confidential. I so move.
Seconded, Councillor Russell.
Seconded by Seamus. All right. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Councillor. I'm going to call for the question, and I'm going to ask all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any contrary? All right, that is good. Thank you very much, Councillor. We're going to move now on to 14.2.2, and I'm going to ask that Councillor Mason put that on the floor, please.
Just thinking I should call one of my kids in here to entertain us all, but I don't think they'd appreciate that.
Barking up their own tree.
Need to get a dog. I move that the Executive Standing Committee 1 adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated May 17th, 2021, and 2, direct the staff report dated May 17th, 2021 be maintained as private and confidential. I so move.
All right, I have a second. Thank you, Paul.
Councillor Russell.
Councillor Russell for seconding. All right, ready for the question?
Question?
All those in favor, aye.
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 Any contrary, nay? All right, that is great. Thank you, Councillor Mason. 14.2.3, Councillor Russell, would you put that on the table, on the floor for us, please?
Thank you. I move that the Executive Standing Committee 1 adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated May 20th, 2021, and 2, direct that the staff report dated May 20th, 2021 be maintained as private and confidential.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second it.
Second.
Councillor Hensby, thank you very much. Ready for the question?
Question.
Question.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
contrary? That has passed. Thank you very much. And now we have 14.2.4. Councillor Hensby, would you put that on the floor for us?
Okay, it is motion that the Executive Standing Committee 1 adopt the recommendations outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated May 19, 2021, and 2, direct the staff that staff report dated May 19, 2021 be maintained as private and confidential.
Thank
Second.
you. Is there a seconder? That's seconded by Councillor Blackburn, I think I heard. All right, ready for the question?
Question?
All those in favor, aye.
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 Any contrary, nay? Not seeing any. All right, that has passed. Thank you. All right, now, Madam Clerk, we did not have any added items brought forward when we set the agenda. So the next thing is notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? All right, I'm not seeing any public participation. I'm not aware of any.
There are no members of the public signed up for today's meeting.
All right, thank you, Phoebe. Then the next item is that the date of the next meeting is June 28th, 2021, and I will ask for someone to move that we adjourn.
So moved.
Moved.
Thank you, Councillor Hansby. Have a good day, folks, and thanks.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Phoebe.
Thanks, staff.
Aye all.
Bye-bye.